morning. It is 6:07. We're a minute late. Good grief. It is Tuesday, October 29, 2019. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone on RadioWestchester.com, the station at the New Rochelle train station. You can listen live on Westchester, or rather RadioWestchester.com, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope. I'm Bob Marrone. Once again, we are Radio Westchester. It is 52 degrees. It's overcast. It's going to get up to 61 today. Periods of drizzle, though, throughout the day. Tonight, same thing. Cloudy, light showers, sprinkles, getting down to 54. Tomorrow, same thing. Thursday, same thing. We'll tell you all about it. The headlines today, a lot of them are New Rochelle-centric. A New Rochelle school teacher is charged with a sex crime involving a student during school hours. He was arrested yesterday. The development commissioner here in New Rochelle has apologized, although likely to be charged with assault for pulling that person out of the elevator. We'll tell you all about that story. And community members are saying that the New Rochelle intersection, one important one, needs safety improvements. And out of Mount Vernon this morning, a police lieutenant is suspended in an overtime probe. We sort of heard hints of that yesterday when we were talking with the prospective mayor, Sean Patterson Howard. Let's get right to those stories. You're listening to Radio Westchester. Right here, we are the station at the station. Today's program is brought to you by United Hebrew, the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Pena and Khan, Domestic Cigars, and plug-in virtual reality. Let's get to those news stories, of course, with an admission that we need to remember it is early voting. Let's get cracking. A New Rochelle high school teacher is accused of engaging in sexual activity with a teenage student during school hours. This, according to police. The teacher, one John Fraioli, a 34-year-old White Plains resident, was arrested yesterday and charged with third-degree criminal sex, a felony. Police said that the alleged act happened with a 15-year-old student in late spring while he was employed as a teacher. He is scheduled to be arraigned in New Rochelle City Court today. Police say they couldn't give out any other information, and the investigation is ongoing. This out of the Journal News today. There, Chris Eberhardt. This story from many sources, Talk of the Sound, Low HUD, News 12, etc. The New Rochelle Development Commissioner says he is sorry for tossing an employee out of an elevator in his building. Surveillance video seems to show the New Rochelle Development Commissioner Louis Aragon shoving what looks like a security employee out of the elevator in the Trump Plaza apartment building here in downtown New Rochelle. Pardon me. The altercation happened around 6 a.m. Friday inside the commissioner's apartment building. The commissioner says he has been called that name one too many times. What is that name? He said we were having an argument about the elevator being used, the passenger elevator being used to deliver newspapers, at which point he called me. He used a homosexual slur. Being a Latin gay man in this world is not very easy. I've been discriminated against numerous times, said Aragon. He says he tossed the cart with the workers' newspaper out of the elevator and the worker out with them. He says he apologizes for his actions because he lost his cool. The city of New Rochelle says it is aware of the incident happening last week regarding one of its city staff members, but has thus far no comment. The New Rochelle Police Department also had no comment. It is 6:12. This next story out of New Rochelle as well. Some community members are calling for changes at a busy intersection here in town, this in Low HUD. They say one of the main concerns is that one corner of the crosswalk at the intersection of Palmer and Stevenson Boulevard doesn't have a ramp. Charles Pedroso says people tend to drive recklessly, and if someone tries to cross at the street line, drivers will honk and almost hit people going through. New Rochelle spokeswoman Kathy Gilwood told News 12, who also gave us the story, that Palmer Avenue is actually a state road. The city has contacted the New York State Department of Transportation to report the concern and find out the status of any improvements. Late Monday, the state DOT spokesperson told News 12 in part, quote, pedestrian safety is a top priority for NYS DOT. We are planning a project to enhance the pedestrian crossings and signals at that location. This next story, in some ways, comes as no surprise, particularly after some of the interviews we've had with Sean Patterson Howard and the ongoing issues in Mount Vernon over the last several years. This out of New Lohud, today. A controversial Mount Vernon supervisor has been suspended, a police supervisor, amid the department's probe of alleged overtime use. Lieutenant Michael Marrone, or Mark Usilli, a 24-year veteran of the department, was suspended without pay by Police Commissioner Sean Harris on October 24th. Police Officer Jesse Smiley was placed on modified duty as part of the same investigation. Specific details about what led to the personnel moves were not available, but Harris confirmed that one of the issues involved improper overtime claims. There was no elaboration. Now, some of this goes back to 2006. After his promotion to sergeant, Mark Usilli faced a string of excessive force allegations that ended up costing the city nearly $1 million in lawsuit settlements and legal fees. One case involved the beating of a 12-year-old with a baton back in 2009 after the boy and his friends were found inside a school building. A jury in federal court awarded the boy $500,000. The case later settled for $250,000. The story continues. Under Mayor Richard Thomas, Mark Usilli was promoted to lieutenant more than 2 years ago and put in charge of the traffic unit. Smiley was one of the motorcycle officers in that unit. Harris tried to transfer Marrone to the Parking Bureau in March, but the transfer never took effect because Harris was terminated by Thomas. When Thomas was forced from office this summer, acting Mayor Andre Wallace made Harris commissioner again, and Marrone was moved to the Parking Bureau. In general, this level of overtime is something that is absolutely under investigation by that city, the current mayor, likely, as well as whomever wins the race next week. It is 6:16. Bedford School Superintendent Christopher Mano announced he will be taking a medical leave of absence, according to an email he sent out Sunday. Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Joel Adelberg, will be acting superintendent. There's no information about how long Mano expects to be gone. He did not give further details about his condition. This next story out of Greenberg, as we pass through 6:16 now, a 14-year-old is in critical but stable condition, and an 11-year-old is in stable condition after they were struck by a car. This happened about 8 o'clock, actually, on Friday. We're getting to this story late, obviously. The children were crossing North Central Avenue from west to east of Lawton Avenue when the car traveling on North Central struck them. The two children are currently being treated at Westchester Medical Center. And while we're in Greenberg, multifamily developer Marathon Development Group plans to rehabilitate the 6-acre West Help campus in the town of Greenberg. The town and the developer have linked plans to retrofit the 108 studio apartment units at the former affordable housing complex into 74 affordable units for seniors as part of a $17 million initiative. So 7 affordable units for seniors are in the plans in Greenberg. That out of today's Journal News and USA Today. Also out of USA Today in Lohar, a Bronx man was sentenced last week to 13 years in prison for kidnapping his girlfriend at gunpoint and threatening to kill her during a crash on the thruway in Yonkers back in 2016. Johan Ramos, 31, was sentenced on Friday in Westchester County Court, where he pleaded guilty to several charges. Back in August, the Westchester County DA's office noted that Ramos abducted his girlfriend around 4 o'clock on June 27 back in 2016. That is when he confronted her in the elevator of her building. Let's take another look at the weather this morning. It's not a pretty sight. It's not horrible, but it isn't good. The weather this morning is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. That's uhgc.com. Right now it is 52 degrees. It's overcast. The 61, the top today. We'll have periods of drizzle off and on throughout the day, maybe leveling off at about 59. Tonight, cloudy, light sprinkles and drizzle again, off and on. The temperature getting down to about 54. Tomorrow, more of the same. Cloudy, showers, light showers and sprinkles. But we'll have a little bit more rain, heavier rain on Thursday. Again, cloudy, rain off and on. The temperature getting up, though, as high as 68 degrees. It's not pretty out there. Well, as we come up on 6:20, obviously, today, a lot of stories coming out of out of New Rochelle and Mount Vernon. No surprise in either case. Maybe the ones in New Rochelle, certainly having a child abuse issue coming out of the school is troubling. And it's in 2 days from now, today being the 28th, actually on Friday. Good grief. The first is coming. On Friday, the new school superintendent will take the helm, and she has to deal with a lot. And right after the election, we'll get right back to having the school superintendent, the president of the school board, and other school issues likely taking the front page, particularly after the school's chancellor, the school superintendent, takes the job officially on Friday. Wow, where do we go from here? This is, I guess it happens in every school. It happens in different schools, but nonetheless, our top story today, if you're just joining us, this story coming out of New Rochelle, a teacher charged with a sex crime involving a student during school hours. Now, it said when he was a teacher in terms of the person that they accused, so we shall see whether he's still a teacher and whether this was known before he was charged. Now, yesterday I got a story from one of you, one of our regular callers, and let me get back to this here. And here's what it was about. I want to be sure to do this because we like to be fair. And obviously the person was saying, see if you have, well, the temerity and actually fair play to cover this with the gusto you throw at POTUS. Well, the gusto I throw at POTUS is equivalent to the gusto one ought to throw at a president of the United States. But yes, this is annoying. The Washington Post yesterday, in referring to this miserable major terrorist who tortured, for example, who had journalists beheaded and tortured a young woman from Phoenix, Arizona, I believe. In one of their pieces, the Washington Post referred to this guy as an austere scholar. Imagine that, an austere scholar, as if he was some college genius that with great principles that tortures people. Yes, they should be attacked. They should be held to account. Although and they did change it as soon as people knew. That's sometimes these newspapers, particularly the more highbrow ones, they try to be less reactionary, less emotional. And in so doing, sometimes, quite frankly, in this case, they obscure the truth. I don't think they are terrorists. I don't think they supported the terrorists. maybe, and this is something that does annoy me, they were trying to make this guy less of a criminal to take away maybe a little luster from the fact that this happened under President Trump's watch. So all's fair. They should be castigated for this. Although the same thing happened when Obama, and see now I'm doing a what about, which I generally don't like. The same thing though happened when Obama caught Osama bin Laden. It was minimized, and that's the political climate within which we live today. Both sides guilty of that. More people will be appearing today in front of the special committee to look into impeachment, and it looks now like they will go to a vote. So the efforts by the White House, for good or ill, to keep people from testifying, those will no longer hold water because they're told that they will continue to do so until the vote is taken. Now, those votes, that move forward may actually hurt the Democrats. But I'm of the mind that I don't care if it hurts the Democrats or not. I don't care if Mike Pence becomes president. I don't care if Bugs Bunny becomes president, so long as we follow the rules that have been laid out in the Constitution, etc. And if those rules protect the president, so be it. If they hurt the president, so be it. All righty, we have a call, and I was trusting that we would get a call on this basis. Good morning. You are on Radio Westchester. Thank you for calling.
Good morning, Bobby. It's Anthony. How are you?
Anthony, how are you? I was hoping you would call. How are you today? Speak.
You kind of missed the point of that article. The point of that article was they had come out with a harder headline, and then under pressure, they changed it to the softer one.
Okay.
Then,
was it under pressure? Well, they deserve, yes. Well, they deserve even more criticism for doing it. I thought they were just trying to be cute and artsy, which I despise, but...
And then after that article came out, they changed it a third time. So my point is that while, yes, I do believe we need a free press, okay, when people criticize it, you kind of give them the press a pass. In this case, they deserve just as much vigor and vinegar as you go against POTUS. It's very obvious they were trying to soft soap something that the president did. If this had been
yes, they did.
Another president, and I won't use any in particular president, okay, it would have been front page news.
I agree with that.
Gets beheaded. He gets caught. He
I agree
dies
with
like
that.
A dog that
I agree
was.
with that. I agree with that. I didn't realize they changed it a third time. And yes, because it was Trump, they tried to minimize it. It is, I mean, I mean, you can only rail against it so much, but those are the reasons why people are so upset with the press, whether it's, and I don't read the Washington Post much for all the papers, whether it's the Times editorial pages or where they put their stories or the New York Post. You're absolutely right. And that's why I wanted to get it out there early.
Look how many times the New York Times has had to apologize or retract stories just recently, within the last 1 or 2 years.
Do you think,
as opposed to their entire history?
Do you think that the problem is that everybody's so emotional that they get angry first, and they want to see either the anger expressed in the story or they want to downplay the story? And it is troubling, and I'm going to ask Jack Breslin about it today. That is what they did.
I don't think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Anthony.
I don't think it's the anger. I don't think it's the anger in the story. I think it's the anger in society, no matter which side of the aisle you're on.
Well, yes.
I said you take a look at the political mailers that are coming out, even locally.
Oh, I saw them.
The candidates hide behind the state committees. In other words, the state committees pay for the mailers, so the candidates are not technically held responsible for what they say. But yet, the state committee runs them by the candidates before they're sent out.
I could not agree more. No, I hate agreeing with you. I could not agree more. Hey, can I ask you a question about this local issue? Do you think the school predator or the guy accused of sex crimes, this was probably known since this happened back in April?
There there was a case going around a couple of years back. It was never confirmed. I understand that the parents took the child and went to another state where I believe it was one of the, well, I'll say school staff, because I'm not 100% sure, actually impregnated a student.
Oh, Jesus.
So, I mean, they're predators, whether they're teachers, whether they're counselors, whether they're, just people, everyday mechanics, whatever. Can you stop it? I don't know how.
Well, you know what? I don't know that you ever stop it. I don't know if you remember a few years ago back in my old station. We had on, he probably still is a Supreme Court justice from Connecticut. And he is one of the foremost experts in America on pedophilia, etc. And although this was with a teenager, it's a pervert nonetheless. And he was saying, and it was so simple, Anthony, that it troubled me. I said, well, where will we find these people? Oh, just like Willie Sutton with money, you'll find them anywhere there are children.
Absolutely.
Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts. It took a while for the Boy Scout issue to come out. And I knew a guy who got in trouble, and I never thought much about it. He told us how he used to work in this boys. It was an orphanage for boys down in Florida. And he got in trouble later in life. I mean, I guess, I don't know that we can stop it, but we need to do a better job of vetting. Incidentally, I don't know, Anthony, and I'm saying this to all callers. Anthony's on the phone with us now. You have a grandson and a granddaughter, and I don't know if you're prepared to do any coaching when they start doing sports. Do you know? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Already doing it.
Well, then you know that you have to fill out all these, you have to take a course now. You have all these draconian rules. For example, my grandson, if I go to one of his games, now they've asked me to be an assistant coach. I will not be allowed to be an assistant coach until I finish an entire online and then in-house course. But now listen to this. You're not allowed to talk to the kids in the locker room. You can't go in while they're dressing, which means you can't talk to them before the game until they come out. I mean, I understand all these things, but now it's gone so far the other way. You can't even have a conversation with these kids. You have to be very careful.
It's a typical knee-jerk reaction. Because there are individuals who take advantage of a situation, and they are in the vast minority. We now have to try to come up with a policy that's 180 degrees the other way, and it'll never work.
I mean, how are we going to teach? I mean, on the rink, I guess, but there are certain things in sports that need to be done with players one-on-one. There are things that need to be taught at rather lengthy instruction. There are things that need to be taught about character. I'm a little bit troubled about how that's going, but I guess it's the way it is until they become adults. Anthony, thank you.
You know, Bob, I used to run the Boys and Girls Club leagues for many years.
Yeah.
As the commissioner. And there were times where you had, a kid that could have been, who was very talented, but maybe didn't have the social skills, I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So sometimes you had to pull them aside and just talk to them. I'm not talking about, I'm just saying, look, listen, you're a talented kid, but you're not coming over well, you're not being a team player, you're not thinking about your team, and now you can't do it. Now, I understand the need for something, and maybe that course you take should say you can't be in the locker room alone with the kids. But
what does alone mean? When you got 20 kids on a hockey team, or 16 kids, and we're not talking 7-year-olds, we're talking 16, 17-year-olds, what the kids just before they go to junior, which is like college hockey. You can't go in the locker room while they're changing, and you can't talk to them till they come out. I mean, it's nuts.
Like I'm saying, I'm sure there's more than one coach on the team, so that's why I say can't be alone with them. But it is what it is. It's just one other thing on that other issue with Rochelle.
Yeah, please.
The one thing missing from this whole story with the development commissioner?
Yeah, please. I was going to ask you about that next. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I even forgot I had a note here. Go ahead.
Absolutely no one has come out to defend him, to say that's out of character for him. I know him. I can't believe he did that. And I think you know him better than I. I don't have any personal relationship with him. I only know him by reputation. But even from those closest to him that he works for, I don't know anybody that thinks he's the knight in shining armor.
Well, I'll tell you, and that's always dangerous. And that's, as you know, one of the great stories in John Adams when he defended the British soldiers at the so-called Boston Massacre, which most of them were acquitted, all but one. And that is, we can't make judgments on that basis. I know people do, but two things. Now, I've had, and full disclosure, because I talked about it on the air at the time, when I was running the Business Council here in Westchester, the Chamber of Commerce, I have my run-ins with him because we had different agendas, and he was a tough hombre, and we went toe-to-toe a couple of times. But on the other hand, there were other times at events and different things like that when he's a very well-heeled cerebral gentleman. Those are the two extremes of the man I know, and he's done more as a development commissioner in 5 years than the whole rest did in 100. Now, having said that, we'll never know unless there's an audio whether that guy, whether he just wanted the guy out of the elevator, or whether when he said you don't belong in this elevator, the guy made a homophobic remark. I got to tell you, if I were gay, I mean, I'm famous for an incident at the hockey rink when somebody called me an old man, and I wound up throwing my helmet at him. People do things when they're insulted, Anthony. So I'm going to, for now, he's got the benefit of the doubt from me, but you're still not supposed to touch someone. Do you know
listen, I don't doubt, I don't deny him his record with development and everything else. All I'm saying is that when you see people that know him and work with him just post one word, and that word is karma, it just speaks volumes.
No, I understand that, and it's just loving the law the way I do, sometimes to a fault. One thing should have nothing to do with the other, but you and I both know that it will. Well, we'll see. I'm sure we'll hear more about it. Bob Cox is coming, and he's been following the story very closely. He's with us today at 7:35 for his usual visit, so we'll find out from him. And Anthony, just as you get relaxed now and you have your morning coffee, you can prepare yourself for Mike Edelman at 7:20, so don't eat anything.
Oh, no, I'm on my way down. I may pop in on you.
Oh, no, please
maybe
do.
I'll be there live with Mike Edelman.
You can choke the phone. Listen, thank you very, very much, and drive carefully.
I can puke on your shoes.
Well, given your height, you won't have far to go. Thank you very much for the call, Anthony. We'll talk to him when he comes into the studio and annoy him a little bit. We are open for telephone calls, as you can see, 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. Now, Anthony and I, we agree on some things, but when we disagree, we make a nice team of good cop, bad cop, depending on what side of the issue you're on. And here are two stories. This is manna from heaven. We give one to each of you. One, well, not to each, to the people on the not the extremes, but if you identify as a liberal or a conservative, both of these stories have something for you. Procter & Gamble has agreed, now get this, to remove the Venus femininity symbol from the packaging of its menstruation products in response to complaints from trans activists that they you can't believe this. Procter & Gamble said activists have helped it understand, quote, that not everyone who has a period and needs to use a pad identifies as female. That's so. I mean, really, Procter & Gamble. Boy, they ought to. Maybe someone in their business will produce testosterone for them. Anyway, which I throw in there specifically just to confuse the rest of you. The company will use a new wrapper design without anything feminine. That is absurd. That is absurd. The vast majority of people who use this stuff probably identify as women. So go ahead, don't market to them. I hope people buy another brand, Procter & Gamble, you wuss bunnies. Okay. Now we go to the other side. Officials in Mississippi this week erected a fourth monument to Emmett Till. He was the black 14-year-old lynched by a white mob in 1955. After 3 previous monuments were stolen and or riddled with bullets, obviously by white lunatics, the new monument of Till weighs more than 500 pounds and is made from hardened steel covered with a thick acrylic panel that should withstand a rifle round. Good grief. This is just amazing. All right, let's see what we have. Now, this is interesting, and this is apropos of the new president. This is about tolerance, it says. With a new poll showing that 72% of white evangelical Protestants now believe that a person who commits an immoral personal act can serve effectively in public office. I actually don't disagree with that, but the figure has skyrocketed for some reason from a mere 30% in 2011. And that's all of us sometimes with our moral beliefs. They can be adjusted to fit the situation. And where was I here? Okay, Johnson & Johnson. There's so much going on. I tell you, we could do 78 shows if we wanted to today. As we move along, did you know that not all these vaccinations that we get every year, they don't all work? They're only like 60, 70% effective. But you know what? It's better than not having it at all. And now to more stories. Again, this is like we're being balanced right now because we're trying to show how the extremes got to get a life, I think. Should I start with rural voters or Hillary's emails? Okay. Perhaps you missed it, but this is Hillary's, the most important story of 2016 has finally come to a close. After a multi-year investigation, the State Department has concluded that Hillary Clinton's use of a private computer server for her emails resulted in, quote, no systematic, deliberate mishandling of classified information by her or other department employees. You don't say. It's now undeniable that the massive amount of news coverage of her emails during the campaign was an immense media screw-up. This speaks to Anthony's point before. In this case, they screwed up in the other direction. Journalists had already decided that Bill and Hillary Clinton were corrupt liars and seized on the email story as proof in a foolish attempt to seem even-handed and unbiased. The press falsely equated Hillary's use of a private server with an avalanche of scandalous behavior by Donald Trump. This story in the Week magazine. Now, let's go to the other side of the aisle. Rural voters aren't stupid. This came out of the Wall Street Journal. Why do struggling rural Americans vote against their own interests? Social justice leftists have been asking this question for years, finding it unfathomable that they call them ignorant, manipulated rubes in red states support Republicans like President Trump instead of lining up behind Democrats who want to spend more money. I knew the answer to this before I got to it because I talk about the people that I grow up with all the time. And something where they become very, very, you know what? They become unfairly marked as rubes if they support aspects of this president. And this is where you got to give these people their due. It doesn't occur to the left, this piece says, that rural people, blue-collar people as well, might genuinely value self-reliance and self-respect and distrust government programs that breed dependency and put decisions about their lives and local communities in the hands, quote, of faraway bureaucrats. Even if they're currently poor, many rural Americans have hope that they will eventually succeed. Instead of telling these citizens what's best for them, Democrats should ask, quote, how they define their own interests, unquote. If urban liberals can't manage even the modicum of respect, they shouldn't be surprised that rural people vote for their opponent. And that's a meaningful piece. Now, a lot of the people, and I said that I grew up with because I think what we miss here in the big cities, on both the East and West Coasts and elsewhere, is there are middle class and upper middle class people, many, many more than you think, who who perhaps came from blue-collar families, but who made good, went to college or built a business. And we're talking, they may be Italian, Irish, African-American, Puerto Rican, whatever the case may be. And a lot of them remain staunch Republican supporters, despite the president's peccadillos, because of the very same dynamic. And these are people that made it. These are people that busted a gut, that believe that it was their responsibility, however they interpreted it, to support their families, to put bread on the table, to not necessarily ask for help until it was absolutely needed. And I think that the Democrats or should I use an old Bush line, reinterpretation. They underestimate these folks. They underestimate their commitment, their loyalty, and more. So I just wanted to get that one off my chest because it's something that I think we don't look at enough. And look, there's an ugly side to it. Occasionally, for example, it was the wife of just such a guy who came up to me not long ago and asked me if Michelle Obama was a man. This stuff is complicated. It's very complicated. Now, where that rumor comes from, in fact, someone in my family mentioned it to me just the other day. Someone I love dearly said to me, I was reading that some people think that, ignorant people think that she's a man. But when I say ignorant, I don't mean stupid. I mean people who don't follow what's going on in the world. All right, let's move on. Today, as has been the case all week, it's early voting time. And I'm going to go over what those times are. Now, obviously, today's Tuesday, October 29th. You can vote here in New Rochelle at City Hall at 90 Buford Place. That's the entrance. It's behind City Hall. You can go there today from 12 to 8 tonight. You can go tomorrow, October 30th, from 8 to 4. On Halloween, Thursday, you can go from 12 to 8. On Friday, from 8 to 4. On Saturday, from 12 to 5. And even on Sunday, from 12 to 5. Now, you can't go Monday, but you can go on Election Day to go and vote. That's November 5th. That's Tuesday. Your usual voting location between 6 in the morning and 9 at night. We're going to take a quick break, go over the news, the traffic, the weather, all that kind of stuff. Actually, we don't do a lot of traffic on this show because of its global nature. We'll be right back after this. For those of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, you name the visual medium. Yes, you saw me put up the blinds. What do you think? We have some sort of a cleaning person that comes in? I do it. This is a business. You do everything. In fact, I was fixing the printer this morning when ordinarily I would have been opening the blinds. So you got a chance to see it. One of the things we're very proud of right now is this is really live radio. This is the real deal. And we don't hide anything from you. If it happens, you get a chance to see it for good or ill. And all right, let's get back to some other cases here. 914-222-3141. 914-222-3141. This issue with the commissioner, with the hard driving commissioner in New Rochelle needs a little more discussion. As you know, people who do this for a living are fans of radio itself. And we all have our heroes. One of the things that informed this program is the way now a guy like Howard Stern, and we're not talking about what Howard Stern does in terms of the wacky stuff. That's his brand, his thing. That's fine. But one of the things that's become his brand is the notion of finishing up interviews that are terrific and not necessarily going to a hard break if you don't have to. We've robbed that from him. I have been an idol, or rather looked up to. These were my idols, of people like Lon John Nebel many years ago, Barry Farber, even some of the far-right hosts that started it all, like Bob Grant. A fan of the manner in which Rush Limbaugh does the radio, not though the fact that he's become a professional wrestler of words, as has Sean Hannity. But these are great broadcasters. Well, we steal from everybody. And when I say steal, when I was growing up, and then later in my previous career, who did I admire? Well, Don Imus was probably, I wouldn't say modeled myself on him, but the talk show host, that mixed talk and other things, where he could put humor in a serious subject the most. Now, I mention that because it does affect the story that we're talking about here in Rochelle regarding the development commissioner. And that is when Don Imus made those ill-timed comments about women's basketball and the African-American players in women's basketball. He probably would have been treated a little better how he treated people off air better than he did. And many people said, gee, that's calmer. And I get it. But I think when it comes to the law, when it comes to crime, when it comes to breaking the law, we need to be very careful not to judge individuals on their behavior outside of the incident in question. I think it's very unfair to Mr. Aragon. Now, again, there are those that, and this is something we all do, we all rail against profiling, but yet we're perfectly willing to profile an individual when it suits our own narrative. He's a tough guy. He's been nasty to people. Well, maybe he has, or maybe he hasn't been. But I can tell you that he can only be judged on the incident in that elevator. And that's what a judge would do, and that's what a defense attorney would do. Now, should he have grabbed the guy and pulled him out? No. All right? But we don't know what took place, and we should just hold off. Now, if you've got an opinion that differs with that, please do call 914-222-3141. You know, I got an email the other day, and I've been getting a lot more emails since we started this than I ever got on terrestrial radio, and texts. And one particular caller or listener was very unhappy with something that I did politically. Sent me an angry face. And I said, well, that's good. So I sent him an email back, and I said, or I guess it was a Facebook text, don't remember which. And I said, no, please call us. Gave him the number. You'll be received with open arms. And really, that's what we do here. I've rarely lost my temper on the air. I mean, over 15 years. Have I? Yes. I once went screaming into the microphone that I wasn't a potted plant. But one of the things that we're really striving to do here is to really look at the other side of an issue based on whatever opinion I might have. I try hard to look at the other side. I bend over backwards to look at the other side if it's been unclear to me what that person is thinking or feeling. My biggest experience, or at least conclusion about that, is we exist on two levels, and we know we do. How we feel versus what we believe and what the truth is. It's really almost three. The second one is shaded. Just because something makes us angry, what we're angry about and the passion that we feel shouldn't be confused with what's right or wrong, yet it's very hard to do. For example, there are things, and we hold Americans to way too high a standard here. It's okay to not like your neighbor. It's okay inside yourself not to like a group of neighbors. It's okay not to like white people if that's how you feel. If you don't like black people, that's your concern, because those are emotions. And one of the things one learns in life is we can't control how we feel, at least not in the spur of the moment. But this democracy that we live in, though, and this set of laws that surrounds it, that embraces it, that acts as a sinew on the muscles and the bones, this democracy has been constructed with the blinder on the Lady of Justice, so that we treat people fairly, not on the basis of what they feel, but on the basis of what is so. And it's very difficult to do. And believe it or not, one of the things that humor has done, and literature has done, and art has done, is tried to help us see through the difference between how we feel and what we do about it. And the example I have always used ad nauseum, and I'll use it again, there is no person, and I'm sure you all feel the same way about your children, but there's no person on the planet that I love more than my daughter. It doesn't even come close, because my grandson and daughter now, my granddaughter, they're up there. They're even. But throughout my lifetime, in the longest period of my lifetime, I love no one like that. But yet when my daughter was an infant, I had this fantasy when I was angry that I tossed her right out. She was colicky. Right out the window, watched her bounce a few times. And as life left her, Pinky, I closed the window, light a cigarette, and call the cops. That's how angry I was. And why I say humor, for those of you who watched The Honeymooners, and for a while their feminists were saying, he's violent, he says he's going to bop her in the nose. No, that is an artistic expression of his anger, and that's how he manifests it, and even maybe what he thinks. He'd never do it. Because that is, it's like the exhaust coming out of a car. We have to acknowledge that part of ourselves, that we feel that way sometimes. How many times in life has your mother said, I'm going to kill you, or your dad, or I'm going to strangle you? Or as your boss comes running into your workplace where you're making mistakes, I'm going to strangle you, although that's a whole other issue. Anyway, so that's the reason, Detra. The point is that if you want to call this program and you think I'm out of my absolute mind, or some guest who's taking calls is out of their mind, please feel free to call wherever you are on the planet. And speaking of wherever we are on the planet, as we come up now on 7 o'clock, it is 6:54. We made arrangements just the other day, and we may start it this week, though likely next week. We'll be getting a report from Europe on our broadcast every morning about the top stories in Europe, but those stories as they affect us, how America is being viewed in the heart of Europe. And if you haven't traveled a lot, or you haven't had the opportunity to, one of the things you miss is the ability to see America as others do. Whenever I tell people one of my favorite newspapers is the South China Morning Post, it's absolutely true. When you're out in Asia or you're in Europe, you see America in a different way. And when you go through the streets of Tokyo or the streets of Milan or run around London or Paris or any of these other cities, you realize that what we thought growing up in America isn't quite so. We view America as the center of the universe. I mean, somewhere deep down, I still do. We certainly are when it comes to pop culture and modern culture, for all intent and purpose. But then you realize that all the things that we do came out of Europe or Asia or Africa or Latin countries, originating, of course, in Spain. You see the world differently. It is hugely valuable, even the little picadillos, even the things that make people different. For example, Europeans and Asians don't have, and this is something I love about Americans, they don't have our independent streak, our focus on the individual. And here's how it manifests itself. In fact, I did something rather rotten, and I think it was in Hong Kong. I don't think it was in London, but I can't remember, but I did it. And I'd taken my daughter on a business trip, and I wanted to show her how Europeans and Asians follow rules to a fault, something Americans don't do, and it's what I like about us. So I know I shouldn't have done it. This is before 9/11, so don't get angry at me. But there was a sign that said, line up here. So I dragged it out to the middle of a thoroughfare in the airport. And I said, I'm going to put this here. Watch people start lining up. And it was about, I don't know, maybe 50 feet from the actual place they were supposed to go. And they started lining up. I said, the difference between an American and these people is that an American says, this is ridiculous. Who do I talk to about it? And that captures our culture, the essence of it. That's why we allow protests. That's why we make politicians. We beat them senseless, whether it's on Facebook or in vis-a-vis meetings, face-to-face meetings, coffee klatches, or citizens to be heard. It is a very special trait that America should never lose. Now, there's a downside. And people who study these kinds of sociological things, Americans do not like to read directions. Women are a little better at it than men, but in general, if, for example, this computer, I don't even know where the book for it is. This one, that one, all this other geeky stuff here. There's a bunch of booklets in one of the cabinets there, but I've never read them, probably never will. I try to figure it out. It's why I'm semi-literate when it comes to this stuff. But same thing when an American gets a car. Very rarely do we open the book and figure out how to do it. It's really an American trait. It's very interesting. We'd rather just figure it out, whereas the people in Europe will read the whole book and then figure out. And that's neither side is better than the other. But what I do like about the American trait there is we're not easily led, and that is a good thing. It's part of why we have this. There are downsides to it, but we have this almost revolutionary culture. It is almost uniquely American. And you learn that more and you appreciate it more when you travel elsewhere. Particularly, you'll be in Japan. Now, if you go to Japan and you go to cross, let's say, a 6-lane boulevard, all the Japanese people wait for the lights. Incredible. Americans who's darting here, who's going out there. Every light they wait for, and so you're an American. Now, if you squint, and when I say squint, because the Asian features are a little different than our own. Tokyo is just like New York City. May as well be New York City. The numbers of people, the way they dress, business suits now more casual, the clothes for women, with the exception of when I was out there, women were way too deferential. They'd odd when you got to the elevator, but that's gone now for the most part. But to see 200 people lined up at a red light, and all you said, well, there's no cars coming. Why don't we it's just different. Anyway, my little speech there has to do with what we're trying to do here on this broadcast, is try and see the other guy's point of view, the other gal's point of view. And that could be on just about any level, from the LGBT community and the confusion now about, let's say, and this is one where it rattles my brain too, people who are sexually fluid, what that really means, if that is really a condition that is normal or not. And it is fair to say that. I'm not sure about that one, but it is what it is. But to try and see the world as that person would, to try and see the world as, and this is frowned upon here in America sometimes, try and see the world as a communist would, or try and see the world as a terrorist would, or try and see the world as a criminal would. We need to do these things, but less stringently, and more importantly, we need to see the world as our fellow Americans do. Why do the people in rural Mississippi vote for Trump, even if they're very religious, regardless of what he says or does, even if it's not necessarily in their best interests financially? Well, as we saw in that piece, because they view their independence, it supersedes their own self-image, self-interest. And that's really important to note. Not everybody is concerned about their self-interest. Not everybody's cynical, and sometimes to their own damage. All right, we're going to take a break at 7:01. Let's take a look at the lineup for today at 7:20. We'll come back with just a little bit of news and sports in a moment. At 7:20, Mike Edelman is in the house. 7:35, Bob Cox. And 7:50, he'll be here. 8:20, Damon Jones. At 8:35, now for those of you who are looking for work, UPS, the UPS people are so looking for folks, particularly as they head into the holiday season, that they are putting up, we have them right here, not that far away, up in Poughkeepsie. They have special work seminars where you can go and apply for a job right here. And we're going to see at 8:50 if we can't take our microphone out to the train station right out here on the platform and see who's running for office, see if anybody's out there. Jack Breslin join us at 9 o'clock. We're going to take Anthony's issue of the killing of Baghdadi. We're going to take that up with him and see what he has to say about that. So we have a lot of radio to do. Right now, you stay right there. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester. It is 7:02. We will be back right after these words. Good morning. It is 7:02. It is Tuesday, October 29th, 2019. 52 degrees. It's overcast. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone on RadioWestchester.com, the station at the New Rochelle train station. We're broadcasting live from here as we do each and every weekday and soon 24/7. You can listen live on RadioWestchester.com. You can watch and listen, or just listen, if that's your pleasure, on Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope. I am Bob Marrone. Thank you for listening. And let's take a look at some of the headlines we're following for you today. The top headline, and this broke overnight, our New Rochelle teacher has been charged with sex crimes involving a student during school hours. That's what we know right now. And this happened back in May or April. We'll get to that story directly. We have the development commissioner here in New Rochelle, and we've talked a little bit about that. He's apologized for tossing the cart along with the worker out of the elevator here at the Trump building. We'll have more to say about that. Some community members here in New Rochelle are complaining about an intersection that needs safety improvements. Turns out it's a state road, and improvements will come. We'll talk to you about that in a moment. And Mount Vernon Police, a lieutenant there, is suspended in an overtime probe. So a lot of news coming up locally. We'll get to it right now for you. But first, the weather. The weather is brought to you this morning by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It's 52. It's overcast. Going to get up to 61 today. Periods of drizzle throughout the day, off and on. And it's going to be like this for 3 days, folks. Tonight, cloudy, light sprinkles and showers throughout the evening. Tomorrow, a little bit of heavier rain. The same, though, for the most part. Light rain off and on. And Thursday, rain. They don't say light rain. Now the temperatures tomorrow, averaging out about 65, getting up to near 70 on Thursday. But the rain will be heavier. This morning's broadcast is supported by Aging Issues Management, along with Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Pena and Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. Let's get to those top stories. A New Rochelle high school teacher is accused of engaging in sexual activity with a teenage student during school hours. This in Lohud today. The teacher, John Fraioli, a 34-year-old White Plains resident, was arrested on Monday and charged with a third-degree criminal sex act. Police said the alleged act happened with a 15-year-old student in the late spring while he was employed teacher. Again, the inference we take there is that he no longer is. He's scheduled to be arraigned in New Rochelle City Court today. Police said they couldn't give out any other information. Again, we can't tell if he still works there or not, but that's the best that we could do in terms of inferring whether or not he is. Our next story out of Talk of the Sound, the News 12 outlet, and of course LoHub. The New Rochelle Development Commissioner, Luis Aragon, says he is sorry for tossing an employee out of an elevator in his building. A surveillance video seems to show the Development Commissioner shoving what looks like a security employee out of an elevator in the Trump Plaza here in town. The altercation happened around 6 a.m. Friday inside the commissioner's apartment building. He says, and this is a direct quote from the commissioner, "We were having an argument about the elevator being used, the passenger elevator that is, being used to deliver the newspapers, at which point he called me, he used, a homosexual slur. The commissioner says he's been called that name one too many times before, saying, and I quote, "Being a Latin gay man in the world is not very easy. I've been discriminated against numerous times." Aragon went on to say he tossed the cart with the workers' newspaper out of the elevator. He says he apologized for his actions because, quote, he lost his cool. Immediately, he also says, "I, of course, felt terrible and went downstairs, but he was already gone." The city of New Rochelle says it is aware of the incident happening last week regarding one of its city staff members, but had no comment. Likewise, the police had no comment as yet. We speak with Bob Cox at 7:35, who originally broke the story. We'll see what he has to say about that. Well, some community members here in New Rochelle are calling for changes at a busy intersection. This in News 12 today. They say one of the main concerns is that one corner of the crosswalk, this is at Stevenson Boulevard and Palmer Avenue, they say it doesn't have a ramp. One citizen, Charles Pedruso, says people tend to drive recklessly, and if someone tries to cross the street, drivers will honk and almost hit people to get through. Now, it turns out when contacting the city's director of parking, the city's director of traffic engineering said he would look into it when first contacted. But now it turns out that the spokesperson for the city, Kathy Gilwitt, is saying that Palmer Avenue is a state road. She said, and I quote, "The city has contacted the New York State DOT to report the concern." Now, DOT is saying they are putting together a plan to remedy the situation. It is 7:09. A troubling story here out of Mount Vernon, although no surprise given some of the conversations we've had with mayoral candidates and with the various mayors over this past year or two. A controversial Mount Vernon police supervisor has been suspended amid the department's probe of alleged overtime abuses. In fact, Police Commissioner Sean Harris last month announced the overtime probe after $800,000 that was budgeted this year ballooned to more than $2 million. Lieutenant Michael I gotta get this, I gotta fix this in my mouth here. I can't pronounce this word. All of a sudden, an Italian name, Mark Usilli, a 24-year veteran of the department, was suspended without pay by Police Commissioner Sean Harris on October 24th. Also, police officer Jesse Smiley was placed on modified duty as part of the same investigation. Specific details of what led to the personnel moves were not available, but Harris confirmed that one of the issues involved improper overtime claims, but he would not elaborate. Now, there's a lot more to that story. As we learn more, you too will learn more. We're going to reach out to our good buddy, A.J. Woodson, who is scheduled for 8:20 today. Bedford School Superintendent Christopher Mano announced he will be taking a medical leave of absence, according to an email he sent out Sunday. Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Joel Adelberg, will be acting superintendent in Menino's absence, according to the Board of Education policy. There's no information as to how long Mano expects to be gone, and he did not give further details about his condition. Now, folks, early voting is underway. We have some big races here locally. We go, obviously, to the mayoralty in Mount Vernon, a hotly contested race there, although it seems, just from what we know about the way voting patterns work, that the edge has to be given to Sean Patterson Howard. She won the Democratic nomination and has the endorsement of all the Democrats. Now, Andrea Wallace is the acting mayor, a Democrat himself, and what's very unfair is that some people are saying, look, he's a Republican. No, he just has the Republican line. Let's be fair about it. Although, in most people's eyes, likely the underdog. Nonetheless, he's in the job. Incumbency has its powers. We're still going to try and get him on one more time this week if we can close that deal. We'll keep you informed. Here in New Rochelle, a mayoralty as well. Longtime mayor, prior to that, city councilman, 25 years in all. The mayor, Democratic mayor, Noam Bramson, is running against Brendan Conroy. His mom was a city councilwoman. His grandfather, of course, was the governor, Malcolm Wilson, of our fair state. He's got the pedigree, challenger, Republican. Now, that is an uphill battle. But he's running a pretty decent campaign, looking at some of the stuff that's out there. At any rate, you can vote in both these two mayoral elections. In fact, you could have started voting this past Saturday. Now, looking at that, we also have two city council races here in New Rochelle worthy of your attention. 12-year incumbent Lou Trangucci. He's a Republican, and that's a rare bird here in these parts. He is running against the upstart Martha Lopez. She, the Democrat. And also in District 5, we have Sarah Langlois, the Republican, running against Sarah Kay, the Democrat. So those are important races, folks. One of the things that we don't yell and scream about enough, and this is on me and on the rest of us in the media, we get so transfixed with what Donald Trump does. And again, we care, or before him, Obama, and before that, Bush and Clinton. Yeah, it matters. I mean, we have a new tax policy because of the president. Whether or not your children go to war, a president can affect. But in terms of the potholes in front of your street, your school taxes, what time you have to have your bar closed if you like to have a bubbly, when and where you can go eat, and whether or not there are enough seats either in the restaurant or parking spaces outside, how effectively your garbage gets picked up, how the police treat you, the effectiveness of your schools, all this stuff. Local elections. Your city council people matter. One of my beefs with the people who've been calling my radio programs for years here in New Rochelle and throughout the rest of Westchester has been, well, I don't want that. Why is it happening? This is un-American. And then you look and you see every council person voted for it. And you'll say to them, nicely, did you vote? Well, I don't have time to. Well, your council person voted for it. Well, I don't want them. Well, then vote them out. Understand the difference between a Republican form of government and direct democracy. And I'm not preaching. I know you know this, but that means you elect people to represent you. At any rate, if you vote, maybe you have a different school board. If you vote, you have a different set of local legislators. If you vote, you get a different county executive or not. You get a different mayor or not. Maybe the pothole gets fixed. Maybe in Pelham. And I haven't railed enough about Pelham. Why they decided to do this sewer work after the kids went back to school on Lincoln Avenue is enough to drive a nice person crazy. And then they did it on First Avenue, right where everybody gets on the hutch. And so traffic has been backed up all the way into New Rochelle. Now, they're finally working their way towards this. In fact, they're working their way towards New Rochelle, and they're now getting close to the last big dig that they already did where they put up those new homes. Anyway, all this stuff, you're aggravated. You can't get up Harrison Street to go on East Main Street because they broke up the land. Well, again, it's all part of the development. But I'm saying this so that it touches you a little bit in here. The local elections matter. Your school taxes, they matter. And that's why people rail and rail and rail and rail that the school elections are in May and there's such poor turnout. People yell at the mayor here in New Rochelle and over in White Plains and everywhere else in Westchester about taxes. They scream at the county executive about taxes. They scream at the governor about taxes. All fair game. They knew that when they took the job. And then 70% of your taxes are the school tax. And you don't come out to vote for the school board. Good grief. Anyway, so let's talk about voting today. If you're here, actually this applies, and we're just going to give you the voting for because it's a little closer to the radio station. We're talking now about New Rochelle. Today, if you want to vote, it's over in New Rochelle City Hall or over in City Hall in Mount Vernon, except here in City Hall, they're very specific. 90 Buford Place. It's a door behind City Hall. 12 to 5. Early voting. You won't even have to wait till Tuesday. Tomorrow, 8 to 4. Again, this applies to Mount Vernon as well. Thursday, 12 to 8. Friday, 8 to 4. Saturday, 12 to 5. Sunday, 12 to 5. Then early voting ends. And then just do it like everybody else, like me. Vote on Tuesday. It's 7:17. Real quick break. We'll be back, and we will be back with one of the individuals some of you love to love and some of the rest of you love to hate. And that is, of course, Mike Edelman. I like the way that stops abruptly. Kind of announces me, doesn't it? What the heck button did I press this time? If you knew all the buttons I do you want to know how many screens I have? Let me share this with you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 different computer screens that tell me all kinds of information. Some about what I should be telling you, others about what the changes I need to make and when I need to do stuff. Thank you so much for listening. And we just double confirmed AJ Woodson. You saw us do that. Now, we keep telling you each week about upgrades. You saw yesterday we tested our 3-way call system, and we will be doing that again. If not today, later this week. And the recording apparatus is finally working, so our commercials won't all be live anymore. And we have a whole bunch of new people who want to do commercials, but they want to record them. So that piece will be coming to you. We still don't have a date yet for our grand opening, but we will shortly. And Mike Edelman should be calling us any minute, and we can't wait to get into a conversation with him. And Anthony's on the road. What did he just say? He's texted. What did he do now? This is House Libtards. Hard to believe the Baghdadi blew himself up with his children. Oh, my God. No, I get it, Anthony. Anyway. All right. You know what we didn't do today? We didn't look at the Post yet. I mean, we read it. Oh, there it is. Okay, there's my guest coming. All righty, let's get to the up. Did I miss it? Yeah. There he is. See, I put up the sound so you can hear it ring too. Please welcome, without further ado, and we're going to get back to this issue with the New York Post, which I read earlier, but I didn't chop it up yet. He is, of course, one of our political analysts, just had his 72nd birthday. Doesn't know we check him out on Facebook. He is political analyst, ran for Congress here in Westchester, a lawyer. Please welcome Mike Edelman. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Troubled. Now, I want to go to something first, because I do owe this to our conservative listeners. They were very troubled by the way the New York Post, not the New York Post, excuse me, the Washington Post, manipulated the story about Baghdadi. Why the hell did they do that? Don't they realize they hurt their credibility?
I don't know why that particular reference to him being a scholar was in there. I assume that's what you're
an austere scholar.
Austere scholar. He was a murderer. Is what he was.
Yes.
They may be looking to balance the story. He might have been a scholar at one point in his life. I have no idea what his history was, but we know what he was, and to describe him as anything but a murderer is inaccurate for the Post to do.
Well, absolutely,
it is what it is.
Now, having said that, and I just wanted to get that out of the way because I knew you'd be fair about it, but
yes.
The president is. I mean, we should be proud that he did it. He's spiking the ball. Everybody was proud when Obama got his guy, although the press then tried to minimize that too, the press that didn't like him. But let's get down to cases and the impeachment inquiry. It looks like they're going to go to a vote finally, I think Thursday, so that they can
Right.
finally get this other information. But here's what's confusing me, and you've been in politics a long time. By the way, you're hearing a train, by the way. It's interesting.
That's okay.
If it's not a train, the building's going to blow up. Okay. The president, or I shouldn't say the president, all of the facts coming in that we know and that will soon be public.
Yep.
There's no question anymore, and even people that support the president are simply saying, well, everybody does it, but that there was quid pro quo. I mean,
Everybody doesn't do it.
Pardon?
When was the last time it was done? When was the last time?
No, I understand.
A U.S. president. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but people suggest that maybe it was done when President Obama said wait till after the election. But
That's not a quid pro quo.
no, I know. But let me get to my point. I don't disagree with you. But what I'm saying is, how long do these alternative narratives last?
As long as people watch Fox News and don't want to know what happened. So the first thing they said, the Republicans are desperate, but they know what he did. They read the transcript. They said there isn't any vote, so it's not legitimate. So Nancy Pelosi said, okay, we're going to have a vote Thursday. That makes it legitimate. Then they said it was hearsay because the whistleblower wasn't in on the call. Guess what? Today, you're going to hear from United States Army Colonel Alexander Vindman, who was on the call. And he will tell everybody today in testimony that what Trump said to Zelensky was extortion. Then they said there was no quid pro quo. Mulvaney admitted it. So look, Bob, the facts are the facts. Okay? So this is a process of accretion. Nancy Pelosi is allowing the facts to catch up to the public because the public is not aware, like you and I are, people that are, that are political junkies following this stuff. Don't watch Fox. We Google things. We fact check things when somebody posts nonsense, for example. But she's allowing the public to catch up to the narrative. And by the time the hearing starts, it's not going to be a hearing to impeach him. It's going to be a hearing to allow the inquiry to go forward. And it's brilliant strategy because it's not an up or down vote, yes, impeach or not impeach. It's, should we look at this further or not? Should we hold hearings? When are those hearings going to occur? Who's going to testify? And they're going to be open to the public. If you remember Watergate, 19% of voters wanted him impeached at the very beginning. That didn't change until the tapes were released. That didn't change until the Supreme Court ordered him to hand over the tapes. Same situation now. It's going to take months. But he will be impeached. And I'm betting at this point he's going to resign because the Republicans in the Senate are going to confront him with the fact, hey, you know what? We might lose 20 Senate votes.
You really see? I get the sense that they'll still acquit him anyway. I'll get the sense that we're at such a cynical point in our history that it's not going to matter. I hope I'm wrong, because the argument I keep having with people when they say, "Oh, so you get Pence?" I'll take Pence. I'll take anybody that follows the rules and live with the consequences, because that's
Pence.
democracy.
I don't agree with Mike Pence. I wouldn't vote for Mike Pence. That's not the point. The point is that impeachment is in the Constitution for a reason. The framers foresaw a situation where a president would abuse his office. And the way to stop that is to remove him from office by 2/3 of the vote of the Senate, which is a pretty high bar. But the House has the obligation to file the articles of impeachment. So the House is the grand jury, the Senate is the jury, if you want to analogize it.
I understand that. And this is, of course, Radio Westchester. We are talking with Mike Edelman about the impeachment inquiry. Now, Barr troubles me. Now, I've done a little bit of research, though, into the man that Barr chose to do this investigation into, quote, unquote, the investigation. And by Democrats and Republicans say he's a fair man. So whatever is going to be is going to be. Democrats should only worry about this, it seems to me. They should only worry that it's going to be an alternate narrative going on while they do this. But beyond that, do you think they have anything to worry about?
No, because I don't believe for 1 second that anybody in the Obama administration at that point in time, look, did anything wrong. But bottom line is, if Comey and those guys wanted to undermine Donald Trump, all they had to do was announce the existence of the investigation into Trump and Russia during the campaign. But they didn't. That's all they had to do. He would have never been elected if the American public. Instead, James Comey decided to go on and on and on about Hillary's emails, open it, close it, open it, and then he did what he shouldn't have done, which is to essentially smack her down publicly without charging her. But had they simply said, we are investigating, why didn't they leak that? That never leaked. So if all of these people are plotting against Donald Trump, they had their opportunity to bring him down. They didn't take it, did they?
No, they did not. And the fact that the president, and one of my calls, very knowledgeable caller, but still, has said strip away the titles, Republican, Democrat, because my point was that Mueller was a Republican, Comey was a Republican. Generally, people who work in the CIA and the FBI are tend to be apolitical, at least in their practice. Now we see stories like I see today, a cartoon in the Post where McCabe, Brennan, President Obama, Comey, Clapper, Strozik, and Page, they put this is yellow journalism. This is horrible.
Well, the Post is a yellow journalistic Murdoch owned. But what's interesting about Mr. Murdoch and his two kids, James and Lachlan, is they are very slowly backing away from their commitment to the opinion side of Fox News. They did it with Shep Smith. They did it with Chris Wallace when he interviewed Mike Pence on Sunday. They do it with their Wall Street Journal editorials, which go after President Trump for exactly, turning his back on the Kurds and doing what he did in Ukraine. So, Murdoch's a smart guy, but the kids are smarter. They understand that once the Fox narrative is undone, and once Sean Hannity is revealed to be a shill, and once Jeanine Pirro and all the people that are defending Trump, defending the indefensible, once that narrative is gone, Fox may lose a lot of viewership because people are going to say, well, you know what? We were misled. What's the idea? Let's go find another source of news. And they're worried about that. That's why they balance their news, their opinion side with the news side.
Now, are you aware that a lot of the people that watch Fox News don't watch anything else and will still be with Fox? They'll go down with the ship.
Yeah, about 35% went down with Nixon.
I mean, it's just amazing. 7:29. We're talking with Mike Edelman. So where do we go from here? We
have to allow this to play out. We have to hear the testimony. The Vindman testimony today is going to be demonstrated. Fox is calling him. They're calling him a double agent because he was born in Ukraine and came here when he was 3 years old. Meanwhile, he's a Purple Heart decorated Iraqi war hero who spent 20 years either in the army, and he's the chief NSC advisor on Ukraine. He's a true patriot, and he will testify today. So Laura Ingraham calling him an espionage perpetrator of espionage really ought to be thrown off. Do you want to be thrown off the air?
Do you want to ruin my day telling me about Laura Ingraham? That is all she's ever done. I'm
just telling you what she called. That's what she called this decorated Iraqi Purple Heart veteran who was injured fighting for his nation and who is the top NSC advisor because he was born in Ukraine. Hey, listen, my grandfather was born in Ukraine. Okay.
Well, then people
your grandfather wasn't born here either, and Donald Trump's grandfather wasn't born here either. Doesn't mean they aren't patriots, does it?
No, Laura Ingraham, she's an embarrassment. I don't even get me started. You know what I did the other day for the first time in a long time, just for fun? I put Rush Limbaugh on for about 10 minutes, and that's all I could get through. He spun this story that is so fantastic that it was unbelievable. I was unable to listen any further. I don't know how people believe it. It is beyond my comprehension.
Because, Bob, we have alternative realities in this country. We've always had conspiracy theories in the country, but we do now have the internet, Fox News, and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, and lesser varieties of the same thing, and they're making money. Rush makes $40 million a year because he's a very good storyteller, and he engages in false premises. So at the beginning of a show, he'll give you a premise which is totally false, but everything he says from that premise is totally logical, and that's his genius. He's able to do that, but you've got to go after his premise at the very beginning, because what he throws out is not true. So what he says afterwards is automatically not true. Problem is, a lot of the people in this country, not college educated, don't know how to reason, never saw a Venn diagram, can't get from point A to point B, don't know how to do math. If you don't have those critical thinking skills, you can believe anything.
Well, clearly. All right, so your prediction. I predict we get to the election.
No, he's going to leave.
You really believe he's going to
I'm not going to abandon. I can't tell you exactly when. He will leave. It's in his monetary interest to abandon the presidency and not to be thrown out. It's in his interest financially. He's taken a beating at Doral. He's taken a beating at most of his resorts, most of his golf courses. He's taken a beating, and it's in his interest to get out and go start another news program, another network. That's in his interest. Okay, his interest is not to run again, because his Brad Parscale, his poster, is telling him right now he's losing 10 red states by double digits.
Really? 10 red states?
Yes, really.
By
10 red states. Yep. He's losing Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, even Ohio, losing North Carolina, losing Florida, Colorado. He's losing them by double digits. That means it's outside the margin of error.
Okay, you've got another minute. Who will the Democratic nominee be, and who will be his or her vice presidential candidate?
Well, if Joe Biden can hold up through Super Tuesday, he'll be the nominee. I don't know who he's going to pick. He's got a difficult choice. He's got to try and balance his age, his gender, and his ideology, because enthusiasm is what's going to count in the turnout in the election, no matter who is running for the Republicans. And let's assume it's Trump for now. But so he needs to have young people, women, and people of color turn out. And I would suggest he'll put a black female on the ticket. Don't know who that is at this point.
Kamala Harris?
I doubt it. Maybe Stacey Abrams from Georgia.
Okay.
Very possible.
You know, you'll be held to it. Our listeners are writing notes as we speak. All right. Thank you so very much. In fact, someone in the studio just remember. You take care. Mike, everybody, it is 7:34. Happy birthday, Michael. We are 1 minute away from one of our favorite guests, but we're going to share another weather report with you because that's what we do. Today's weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. It is 52 right now. Going to get up to about 60 today, maybe 62. But Bob's trying to see. It's over here in the corner, Bob. And it's down. We just dropped to 51 now, 51 degrees. And we're getting up to 62 today. It's going to rain tonight. Drizzle off and on tomorrow. Tonight, rather, more of the same. Then tomorrow, more light drizzle off and on. The temperature leveling off about 62. I'd love to tell you Thursday would be better, but it will not be better. Thursday, they tell us the rain will be a little bit heavier, but we will get temperatures towards the end of the day up to near 70. We're also supported this morning by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Com, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. Okay, as we head to the bottom of the hour, Bob Cox needs to put on his headphones. This is Radio Westchester. It's Tuesday, October 29th, 2019. This is Radio Westchester. Marrone in the morning, or mornings with Bob Marrone, depending on how you want to weave that. I prefer mornings with Bob Marrone. You can also listen on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope. I am obviously that person. With us now, and he's with us each and every Tuesday at this time, 7:35, the managing editor, the publisher of Talk of the Sound. He's the man who first broke this story about the Commissioner of Development. Again, everybody else is following it now, including the regional networks. Please welcome Bob Cox. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
Hold on, say that again. I put on the wrong button.
Good morning.
It's good to. Well, that was well. See, Bob is acting kind of meek because and Meek doesn't usually follow in his steps, but Jake walked in and they had a little bet. You guys had a little wager on Notre Dame.
Did we?
He was gloating yesterday. But go ahead, Jake. Get on the mic. Let's get this out of the way.
I've never seen Mr. Cox without any Notre Dame attire on.
Well, he didn't come in his Notre Dame attire today.
Actually, I'm wearing black because I'm in mourning.
Oh, you are? What was the spread on that game?
1.
So
And what was the final outcome?
Notre Dame was favored by 1. It was 45-14, I believe.
It wasn't even close, Robert.
no, it was ugly. I actually turned it off.
No.
Fourth quarter.
The weather and the officials played a bit of a part, I will say.
That's it.
I would say no. I would say that the Michigan offensive and defensive line played a much bigger part.
Much bigger part. There were bigger men who played a bigger part. So we had to get that out of the way. He was in here gloating when you weren't here, and I wanted him to face the music directly.
I
so.
appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get to news, and we'll be back with Jake a little bit later in the broadcast. Bob, do you have any updates for us? News 12, you, Lohud, everybody's doing the story. The commissioner, it's going to boil down to, it seems to us, and I don't know if they have audio of that, whether or not the guy used the homophobic slur. And even so, does that dismiss someone getting violent with you?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that the other outlets had picked it up finally, but I guess they did. So I was busy this morning early putting up a story about another matter, which I guess you didn't get to, which is at the high school.
Yes, we did.
So
We're going to get to that
talk about
next.
that, too.
Okay, but since you broke the story, I wanted to see if you got anything new on it.
Well, I actually interviewed the victim.
Yes.
Yesterday.
Saw that.
I went by the police station. He had spent a couple of hours there talking to detectives. It was my understanding, let's say my impression from talking to him and talking to his lawyer that they fully expect that the Development Commissioner, Luis Aragon, will be charged criminally. Whether that was going to happen last night or this morning, I don't know. But then on the assumption that he is going to be charged, probably with things like assault and menacing, then he'd be arraigned, probably in New Rochelle City Court. So I was actually checking this morning my sources to see if they knew whether he had in fact been processed last night. I don't have any information about that. So I'll be at the courthouse today to see if he is there.
What can you? Are you at liberty after your interview with the individual to tell us anything about what he said, how he described it?
Well, what I would say is what I wrote, and it was sort of within the confines of that because he is an alleged victim of a crime. So we don't, for example, identify victims of crimes.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a balancing act here, but what I can tell you is that his version of events is that he was riding in the elevator to make deliveries of newspapers. The elevator door opened, and on Luis Aragon's floor, and Aragon demanded that he get off the elevator. He said he wouldn't get off the elevator, and the guy grabbed the cart and threw him off the elevator, which is what you see in the video. He denied making any sort of slurs of any kind, including homophobic. And, I have to tell you, the guy is just physically, he's a very small guy, very unimposing, seemed very mild-mannered. Luis is a tall guy. He would have been towering over this guy who was sort of backed into the corner of an elevator. I don't think it's a great, scenario for Luis. At the end of the day, it'll come down to he said kind of thing. But I would also say that that somebody uses a homophobic slur is not going to get you off the hook for an assault, which is caught on videotape. So, my expectation is he'll be charged, and we'll see how it plays out.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to the other story. And yes, we did lead with it today. And that, of course, is the story of a teacher who is charged, I guess, yesterday.
Monday he was arrested.
He was arrested for having sex with a 15-year-old student. What more do we know about it?
Well, just what's in the record so far. The police put out a statement overnight. There are school district records, which I pulled. There are county jail records, which I pulled. I'll be back over at the courthouse/police station trying to get more information after the show. The main people I need to talk to aren't going to be in for a little bit. But this is a guy who was hired in 2016 as a probationary social studies teacher. He was on a contract that ran until 2020. The school board accepted his resignation at their May school board meeting, effective June 30th. It doesn't say whether or not he continued teaching or not. It doesn't say whether they were aware of the allegations. There is a question there. Not saying that the school district did this, but there is a law that says that you can't have what they call a silent resignation. So you can't know about an allegation of sexual abuse of an employee at a school district and allow them to resign and go on to someplace else without anybody knowing what happened. That was one of the allegations with the Jose Martinez case a number of years ago. He was the guy who was ultimately convicted of having, I don't want to call it sex, but I mean, convicted on sex crimes.
Some sort of a contact
related to the middle school. That there was people in the district, including administrators, that knew about the allegations, but no report was ever made to Child Protective Services or the police. Not saying it happened here, but I'm concerned, and I want the board and the administration to explain what did you know and when did you know it, because if this occurred, prior to his the board meeting where his resignation was accepted, did they know what was happening? Had they already reported it to the police, or did they just have a guy who walked in and said, I want to go? The timing is, and I don't have the incident report yet, but it looks like Chris Eberhardt at LOHUD does, and he says there's a date on there of May 1st of the incident. Now that can be misleading because sometimes they'll put down a date, but it's not the date or all of the dates. It may be one date because they're putting something down in the form. But his date is May 1, and then his resignation was accepted May 19. So what happened in those 19 days would be a concern. And, the fact is, and this is a fact, the school district has a long history of not being truthful about these sorts of things. So I wanted to at least hear from the board president and the superintendent that they did not know about this, or that they did know, and prior to his resignation that they had reported him to the police.
Well, obviously, Ms. Moselli, the board president, is in office. We will not have actually a superintendent until Friday. So I guess we go back to Ms. Parvey then?
Yeah, she's still the interim superintendent.
She's still the interim
until the week,
superintendent.
yeah.
My first question is this: as someone who's
by the way, go
ahead. No, please continue.
I did email them both this morning, but 6 a.m.
No, I understand. They may not even be up yet. But someone who covers this so closely, are you surprised that we didn't know anything about this yet?
It depends on what happened, because it could be that this student didn't come forward until just recently, and in that case, nobody would have known except the student and the teacher. I don't know. That's, I think, something that needs to be explained.
And yet they resigned back in May, ostensibly.
Well, there could be all sorts of different factors involved here. All I'm saying is that we need to get an explanation because of what happened with Jose Martinez. In that case, 6 different people knew what the allegations were, and instead of reporting him, they actually transferred him and promoted him to a different school. Okay, so we don't want our school district being like your favorite institution, the Catholic Church, right? We don't want to be moving people around. That's why we have things like a prohibition on silent resignations. If somebody's accused like this, the district has an affirmative obligation as mandated reporters. All those people, school principals and teachers and board members, they all have an affirmative obligation under the law to report it to Child Protective Services or police. Did that happen? We don't know. It
is 7:46. Our guest, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, Bob Cox, where we've been talking about both issues making news here. The alleged assault, although even though we have to say that legally, even though we saw it on camera, by the development commissioner against I guess a newspaper worker or a worker for the building over at Trump Plaza. By the way, the issue, and also the issue now making news this morning, the charge of a former, we think former,
No, he is former. He
Definitely
resigned
former.
effective June 30th.
okay, teacher for having sex with a 15-year-old girl. I guess in the school, did they confirm whether it's in the school or not?
I didn't get any information about the sex of the student.
Okay. No, what I meant was that was the sex in the school?
Yes, but you said girl, and I don't
Okay,
know that it was
sorry.
a girl. I don't.
That's right. That's why you're a good newsman. All right, what else are you working on?
Well, I got some stuff related to the campaign, so you can expect Lou Trangucci to feature prominently over the next few days. I've got another story about the president of the United Veterans Memorial and Patriotic Association and his sordid history.
What can you tell us about First Trangucci since people are out early voting? Anything you can say right now about his race?
Well, I mean, I've done a series of stories, and I would say at this point, the bulk of his campaign is being financed by people who have business before the city of New Rochelle, primarily real estate developers. I'm going to do a story that's going to tie together how some of those people are connected. I don't want to tell you everything at this point, but
Spoiler alert.
There will be a story that sort of connects some of the dots as to one of the reasons he's doing this. It's not just to get campaign cash. But I think what's interesting about it is that, social media is an interesting place, as you know. And when I did the first story, a whole bunch of Lou's friends, family, and supporters came flying in to attack me. The usual attack is, besides that I'm a horrible person, which,
I mean, we all know that.
everybody knows that.
Yeah,
So that's not news.
That's a given.
It was that I'm just doing it to get attention, and Lou's a great guy. Second story, a little bit less. Third story, last story about the hospital district, which they're trying to get rezoned in a very, as Ivar Heiden, the councilman, said, an odd way. Not a peep, crickets. So I think they've given up trying to defend what he's doing because you really can't defend it. He's been taking money from developers after years of railing against other people like Noam Ramson, the mayor, taking money from developers.
Although it's important to note, he did return what was the overage of $1,000 per contributor. Is that true? Can we confirm that?
No. He returned a portion of an illegal campaign contribution from one developer.
Because it
but
was in
he's-
excess of the $1,000
But he's
limit.
kept all the money from the person who's involved with redoing the firehouse, Rella Fogliano from Westchester, who did Heritage Homes. He kept the money from the people at the
When you say
hospital.
kept it, though, were they within the $1,000 limit?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, I mean,
But they are developers. So what
They're
you're talking
develop-
about his hypocrisy, not illegality.
Well, I think it's not for me to say whether or not accepting money to advocate on behalf of developers at council is pay for play or not. I believe it's pay for play. He is getting money from people and then he's advocating for their projects. He took this illegal campaign contribution in June, and by September he's in front of the council telling everybody that we have to, back this project. And so I think that's a problem for him. But some people ask me, well, isn't there something that can be done? Yeah, we have this thing called voting.
Oh, yeah.
So
We've been talking about it all morning here.
So
We've given
people,
out the dates
people
and times.
share my concern about Councilman Trancucci, and I don't live in his district. They have a very simple option. They can go to the polls and vote.
Having said that, given the givens and the way politics works now, Trangucci's a 12-year incumbent. Martha Lopez is an upstart. There's this third-party write-in person out there, Mr. Zapata, I think his name is. I don't know how many votes he'll get.
He'll get just enough to help Lou,
Do you think?
which raises questions about why he's doing it. But I'll, confine it to that. I have
You
my
have to confine it to
suspicions.
speculation at this point.
I just find it a little odd that this guy is suddenly a write-in candidate where he has no prayer of winning, but he does have the option to siphon off votes from the Democratic challenger. And this is part of how the game is played. You get stalking horse candidates to draw off votes from your opponent. With the other things I've seen the Trangucci campaign doing, the things I've heard about, which are not good, it would not surprise me in the least if the Trangucci campaign is behind this write-in vote to siphon off votes from his challenger, because the former Democratic candidate is not going to pull a lot of Republican votes. If he's a write-in, he's going to be pulling Democrat votes. So I smell a rat on that. But I don't have any firm information.
Our guest, Bob Cox, managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound. Now, again, without Spoiler alert, without you saying too much, the Parente, you had something about that. You had this story about Mr. Parente today?
Well, I did, not today necessarily, but I did a story about, one of my favorite topics, which is sort of the rank hypocrisy of people who are in the public eye. And in his case, he likes to present himself as this sort of, Audie Murphy character who, obeyed every command and actually put up a post on Facebook a couple months ago that everybody should have to take the same oath he took as a Marine. If you're really a loyal American, if you're a red, white, and blue and American, that you would be taking this oath to obey orders and all this kind of stuff. But, he himself didn't. He was popped for cocaine and marijuana use while he was in the Marines. Had a demotion, loss
I take
of
it
pay.
that's a matter of fact? That's on the record?
I have his records. Well, I've seen his records, his DD-214. So I've seen the records. He's out there denying it, and kind of a humorous. You'll find this humorous, I think, making accusations now that I'm actually on the payroll of George Latimer, who gave me a job to shut me up.
You have a job with George Latimer?
I actually contacted the Latimer people and sent them the allegation, and I said, if I do have some job over there, how come I'm not getting my paycheck?
I would like some of those jobs.
I mean, George and I have been going at it now for a couple of years.
You and George have been at swords, for God's sake.
So
He'll give you a job, all right.
But I figured that at the very least, in the spirit of you can set aside your differences for 5 seconds, that they would find it as humorous.
Did they?
I found it. Well, I'm not going to comment on what they said. It was off the record, but
Okay.
It's pretty funny. So this is anyway. He's got other issues, and I think that one of the things that the city has to consider is, given his behavior, his past record, his history of violence, his history of convictions for violence, his history of drug use, is this really somebody that we want to be in charge of leading patriotic events in the city of New Rochelle?
Although to be fair, if what he did years ago in the military, if indeed he had a drug issue and since improved, that's a good story. That part of it's a good story.
Well, what's your basis for thinking he's since improved?
Well, in terms of drug use, I would assume. I'm making an assumption, of course.
Well, I think that you're making a...
Well, no, an assumption without knowledge. I don't think you're contradicting me. You don't know.
Well, there's things I know, and there's things that I can print, but I would just tell you that you'd be way off base with that comment.
Okay, Bob Cox.
And
What
I
else?
would also point out that he's been arrested 3 times in the past 2 years, and he's facing a felony weapons charge.
What else are you working on? Nothing important I can see.
Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, my main focus in the immediate term will be the Aragon case. I mean, I think that's a major big deal. It's not just about personal matter for Luis. It's a matter of sort of the perception of the city. I've told plenty of people as I've been reporting out the story that, why this matters so much. I mean, I live downtown. I live in a building that's 71 units. About 14 of them are so far leased. It opened a few weeks ago. And it's a minority building. Everybody on my floor, except for myself and one other guy, are black. One's Asian, one's Hispanic. So you don't want this perception out there that somehow there's some kind of, let's say, diversity issue with the development commissioner, because the allegations that are out there is that he... that there was a racial component to his going after this guy.
Oh,
and,
my.
And that's going to be part of the allegations. That's already out there on social media. But
Why? That's what I wanted to ask you about, and we'll take a few minutes to elaborate on this. I looked at some of the Facebook posts after your stories, even some of the posts as regards you. What I find interesting, and I keep thinking back again and again to the Boston massacre, when it turned out only one of the people was convicted, and that's actually who were guilty of starting that fracas. And John Adams famously said, facts are stubborn things.
And you reported on that.
Pardon?
You reported
I'm
on
not that old, Weisenheimer. Well done, touche. I was there.
Takes hold as a narrative remains to be seen. The problem, they're always crying wolf. So what happens when you always cry wolf? Eventually people stop listening to you. So a lot of these same people who are pushing this don't have a lot of credibility Okay, and that's a problem that they have. At the end of the day, this is now going to go through the legal process, which could include some sort of settlement at some point, but certainly there's going to be an arraignment at this point, and we're going to have to let it play out. One interesting fact that I would add that I didn't know initially is that according to my sources, Luis Aragon will hit 30 years in January of 2020 with his pension. Okay, so what that means is he's vested in a few weeks. So that creates an interesting dynamic because he doesn't need to keep working. And the fact is, Luis is a smart guy who knows a lot about development and would probably be picked up by any one of these developers at probably 2, 3, 4 times
the money he makes as a civil servant. Sure.
So he'll have his full pension in January, and so I can envision a scenario where he says meetings, things like that. So but as far as what's happening with the development, not to diminish it,
let's do this, is